You like Dungeons and Dragons? Me too! Hello and welcome back to my channel where I make content about D&D, specifically the Feywild, as I am trying to create a full Feywild campaign for my party who are currently in Wild Beyond the Witchlight, which is a very enclosed Feywild space. As I'm constructing the Feywild, I am looking at our actual real world, at different folklore and literature, and trying to borrow some Fey stuff. I don't want to limit myself to that, but yeah, that's what I mostly do here. And today I am talking about Japanese stories and folklore. A note, just like with other videos along this vein, I am not going to give a complete comprehensive folklore experience here. I'm going to just scratch the surface, pick 2 or 3 stories, and try to use them for some inspiration. So I'll link below the website and sources that I use, and if I miss anything that you think is important or that you want me to talk about later, just let me know below. And before we get started, we need to do comment or idea of the week. This is the part of the show where I look at a comment that was left in the last week and highlight it, because I thought it was a particularly cool or interesting idea, or it just scratched an itch in my brain. As always, there were many good contenders last week, but one that I just particularly enjoyed was this one, talking about Feywild food. For example, the party finds something called goo berries, which look a lot like good berries, but they are actually very dangerous to consume. And then there are other foods they find that aren't dangerous that taste like marshmallows, for instance. I'm very interested in Fey foods and the way different cultures handle them. I mean, they're supposed to be dangerous just to eat, sort of trap people in the Feywild, and you can't really do that in D&D. Maybe for like a period of time, but you can't really permanently trap your adventuring party in the Feywild. No, I guess you could, but you'd have to have a party that's committed to the Feywild and doesn't mind literally being trapped forever, you know? So in game, what does foraging look like? What kind of weird foods can they find? How does a party sustain themselves? If you too want to become idea or comment of the week, it is a high honor. Leave your idea or comment the same thing, I guess, below, talking about something you've done in the Feywild or that your party's done, or monsters or situations you can think of that relate to the stuff I talk about today. So without further ado, let's talk about Japanese tales and folklore. First, a quick definition, and I will try to pronounce things correctly, but I might not, so I'm sorry if I don't. But you need to know what a yokai is, because I certainly didn't. The yokai are a class of supernatural entities or spirits in Japanese folklore. They cover sort of a wide range of entities and spirits. They can be malevolent, they can be benevolent, they often have like animal features, but they can also be humanoid, they can also be nothing like that. It's just like a broad term for Japanese spirit. Like I said, I linked some stuff below if you want to have better, more in-depth explanations than I'm offering. The first story we are mining for inspiration today is called Yuki Ona. A Yuki Ona is a yokai, one of those spirits, and it's translated more specifically to a snow spirit. Here's the story. An old man and a young man have gone on a long journey and they are returning home. When they are, it is winter, and they are becoming very cold. They need a place to stay for the night. The old man sits down, he starts to give up. The young man looks around, he follows a river and finds a hut. It's a very old hut. It's really not that much shelter, but it's better than nothing. So they decide to spend the night there. About midnight, the young man was awakened by an icy air upon his cheek. The door of the hut stood wide open, and he could see the whirling snowstorm without. It was not very dark. "A pest upon the wind," said the young man. "It has blown open the door, and the snow has drifted in and covered my feet." And he raised himself upon his elbow. Then he saw that there was a woman in the hut. She's leaning over the old man. There are icicles dripping from her fingers, and she turns and looks at the young man. She approaches him, takes his hand. He instantly feels frozen and sleepy. He thinks that this is death, but then the spirit sort of mutters to herself, he's too young. And she lets him live. Before leaving, she makes him swear to never tell a soul what he has seen or heard. And then he falls into a deep sleep. The next morning, a countryman comes and wakes him up, helps him, and the young man eventually makes his way home. A few years later, in the summer, that same young man is walking down a road. He finds a young woman heading down the same direction, but the heat is making her faint, so he takes her to his mom's house to recover. She spends a few nights there, they fall in love, they get married, and she has 7 kids. Cool. These are strong, beautiful children, and she herself is strong and very beautiful. In fact, you expect someone to have some physical signs of having birthed 7 children, yet she looks the same as she did years ago. So of course this man is considered very lucky, and one night he is musing over his pale, perfect, beautiful wife, and he starts to tell her the story of the snow spirit he encountered and what happened to him that day. His wife reminds him of that spirit, and as he reaches the end of the story and is about to tell the part of the promise that he made and the exact wording of it, his wife actually recites it. Turns out his wife is the snow spirit, and because he broke his promise, she goes to the children who remark how cold she feels. She tells them goodbye and leaves them. "Farewell, farewell," she cried, and her voice grew thin and chill like a piercing winter wind. Her form grew vague as a snow wreath or a vaporous cloud. For an instant it hung upon the air, then it rose slowly through the smoke hole in the ceiling and was seen no more. The story is kind of creepy, kind of sad, a little inexplicable at first. Why did the snow woman end up finding the man and marrying him? Why was it so important that he keep the promise? Otherwise he would leave her. It does feel very Fey. Maybe a promise you didn't fully understand the implications of that you ended up breaking, and therefore consequences you didn't know could happen. I sort of have two ideas for how to translate the story into a D&D session. For one, I was really thinking about that old abandoned hut, especially if your party is in a wintry region. Maybe near the end of their day when they're looking to have a long rest, you could present them with an abandoned hut. It's clear that it's abandoned. It's not great shelter, but it's better than nothing. Evidently, in edition 3.5 of D&D, there was a spirit called an ice ghost. Maybe something like that is haunting the hut, or maybe something more like an ice devil, which is very beefy. Ice devils also have this wall of ice ability, which is exactly what it sounds like. It constructs a wall of ice. It could use that to trap the party inside the hut. At that point, you decide what it wants. Does it want to make a deal? Does it want to just kill them? Is it trapping the party and waiting for some other entity or creature to get there? My other idea, I don't have a particular D&D monster in mind, and so I'm curious if there's one you think would fit this. The party could come across a town in a wintry region, stay there for a moment or two, and while they're there, they can't help but notice one townswoman who is so different from the rest. Maybe she's particularly beautiful. Maybe it looks like she's glowing. If they follow her or talk to her or however they approach this situation, if they do at all, maybe they realize that she's a mother and she has 7 children she takes care of at home, and she seems perfectly normal except for her sort of strange appearance. She could be some sort of ice spirit or maybe possessed by one, so that during the day she is a normal woman who takes care of her household, and by night, maybe she goes to the elderly in the village and drains their life. I wonder if you could do some sort of like ice vampire situation here. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not sure where I want that one to go, so if you have any ideas, let me know below.
Mujina.
Mujina?
Mujina.
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 Okay. Next is the story of the mujina, which is another type of yokai. It's based off the Japanese badger, or also called the raccoon dog. The thing with the mujina is they're sort of like trickster figures. They will transform the way they look into another being or creature, just depending on the story. And the only way to tell what it really is by a slight luminescence on their skin, or if you meet one in the rain, their clothes might be dry. One story goes that on the slope of the province of Ki, there's a neighborhood that travelers go to great lengths to avoid because of the mujina that live there. An old merchant is the last person to see one. One night, as he's walking by a moat in the town, he sees a woman crying by it. She is clearly in distress. She looks like a fine lady. She's in respectable clothes, and he wants to ask her what's wrong. He wants to make sure she's okay. She continues to cry. Her face is in her hands. She's clearly distraught. He keeps pressing and saying, you shouldn't be out here. Are you okay? She stands up, her face still in her hands, and finally she wipes it off and reveals that she has no face. Creepy. She has no eyes, no nose, no mouth. The man is rightfully terrified and runs. He runs until he sees a light on, and he finds a soba seller who still has his lantern lit, and the man is freaking out, and the seller's like, "What's wrong? Calm down." And the other man is like, "I can't even tell you what I saw. It was horrifying." The soba seller is like, "Did it look something like this?" Wipes his own face. Same thing. Very creepy, egg-shaped, no-feature face. And to make it just that much more scary, as soon as he reveals his face, the light goes out. The end. Super creepy. There's also another being in Japanese folklore called a naparabo, which is a faceless ghost. And that and the mujina can be confused. The mujina might disguise itself as a Nopperabo, but not necessarily. And the Nopperabo is the faceless creature, and it might disguise itself as a human. Either way, both beings, both entities, both spirits don't really want to cause harm, they just want to cause mischief. They want to scare people. You could have some sort of creature in your campaign that wants to do the same, just freak people out and not do any actual harm. And then the party might have to decide, like, is this a problem? Do we have to kill this thing? Like, how bad of a crime is it to scare people? Or do we just remove it from the town? I don't know. But I was trying to think of some sort of faceless monster for D&D, and I couldn't really find anything except homebrew stuff. But I actually think a doppelganger might work really well. Maybe a doppelganger in its base form has a non-face face, a face without a face. Their offspring are also called changelings because doppelgangers will disguise themselves as human men, have a baby with a human woman, and then leave her to raise that baby, who until adolescence will just be like a normal kid, and then it turns into a doppelganger and goes off to find its kind. But changelings are also very traditional fae, where a fae being or creature might replace a human child with one that looks just like it, and I don't know what they end up doing with the child in the Feywild. Maybe they keep it, maybe they abandon it to the wilds, but either way, they replace the baby. I mean, the party could even come across someone who has been replaced by a changeling, and they have been stuck in the Feywild ever since. I think that would actually be a really cool, like, player character backstory. One potential storyline I really liked was having doppelgangers slowly take over a town. So they don't just like turn into a person and automatically know how they act. They can kind of read people's minds, and so they might take the person they are disguising themselves as and keep them alive for a while to learn how to be them. I like the idea of the party coming across a whole little town or village of doppelgangers, or maybe just like a family. The party might notice that some of the townsfolk act a bit strangely. They might realize that these are doppelgangers, or see one disguising itself or moving out of its disguise. And they might realize that the townspeople they're disguising themselves as are still alive. Depending on how many doppelgangers you put in this encounter, it might not be very prudent for the party to try and kill them all. There might just be too many, but can they set the townspeople free? Can they at least save them in that way? Tying back to the original story and the Mujina, you could also just have a race of humanoid badger people who like to play tricks. That'd be cute. The doppelgangers also could be more like the ones in that story that just want to scare someone. It's uncool, but it's not deadly. How old was that man? Next, I don't think I can do a video on Japanese folklore and D&D without talking about the Oni. The Oni is another type of yokai or demon. They are specifically malevolent. These are evil. They're known for being murderers, cannibals. They often look ogre-like. They have horns. I found one story about two Onis. One was red, one was blue, and these are actually not evil, but the red Oni, I think it was the red Oni, wants to befriend this township of human beings, and it tries to leave notes and gifts, but Oni are supposed to be evil, and so the people are freaked out and want nothing to do with it. So what the blue Oni does is goes and pretends to attack the town people, and so the red Oni can swoop in and save them, and then suddenly they like the red Oni and they will be his friend. Unfortunately, that means the blue Oni does leave and leaves a note to the red Oni saying, you know, they'll recognize me as the evil Oni, so I can't really stick around, but like, enjoy your new friends. And then the red Oni's very sad because it lost its friend. There is also, and this is a big spoiler for Wild Beyond the Witchlight, maybe not a big spoiler, but it's a spoiler for sure. There's an Oni in the campaign, Will of the Feywild. Onis in D&D are evil beings as well, and they will sometimes work with hags in order to get like cool magical items and just like rewards like that. And so Will was once an Oni who was working for the hag. Presumably, I think he was getting children for her, finding them, bringing them to her, but then he was cursed and made good. Yeah, the story feels very Peter Pan. He's now good, he's in his boy form. He knows he was an Oni and he still has his Oni abilities, but he no longer has that evil nature. And so as long as his like nature isn't switched back, he's an ally to the party. And yeah, I think that's a really good idea, having this traditionally evil being be good. Maybe it was cursed, maybe something about its nature just altered, and the party might have a moral conundrum, especially if the Oni has done evil things in the past but is no longer doing them. yeah, throw in an Oni. But that is what I have for you today. What would you do with these yokai? Are there any stories that you think you want to implement in your party? Are there any that you've done that you think are very similar or might fit well with one of these monsters? Also, ice vampire. What do we think? If you've made it to this point, thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know below as well any other videos you might want me to make coming up soon. I am at the end of my grad school. I graduate in about a month and I have 3 term papers to write. So video making might be a little spotty, but I'm looking forward to being graduated, having my degree, and making sure I can post regularly. And so yeah, leave ideas below because I'm gonna have a lot more time on my hands pretty soon here. Like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you liked me, and I hope I will see you next time.